to make this a hand sewing project, which is lovely meditative hand sewing, hand piecing, no EPP in sight. I think it's called American Traditional Hand Piecing or Traditional Hand Piecing. It was featured in my Hope and Stars Block of the Month thing that I did last year, which people loved, so why not have a go? It's lovely, and you can do it with curves as well. So you've got a template sheet here. Cut these out along the black lines. These don't include seam allowances, so you need to add those as you cut the fabric. It's all the instructions and in the following tutorial. When you come to cut out your border strips for your hand piecing project, you've got a board. If you don't own a quilter's ruler, if you do order a quilter's ruler, you can cut 3-inch lengths across the width of the fabric and then draw in a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance around all the edges, so that'll be your sewing line. Alternatively, you can use the template that's on your sheet. So as you can see, there's a line there, a bit way down. That measurement from there to there is for your 2 shorter border strips. So you sew around those, 3 of those all in one line, and that'll be your 2 shorter ones. And then for your 2 longer ones, you're going to have to draw 3 of the longer ones and then 1 separate one, and sew that one onto the 3, and then that'll give you your 2 longer border strips. It's all in instructions, and there's a little graphic in there if that made no sense at all. But yeah, so you don't need a quilter's ruler, so don't worry. So to start off with, you've got a set of templates in your kit for hand sewing. So these don't include seam allowance, so you need to draw them on the wrong side of your fabric, draw around them, and then cut them out, add in an approximate 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way around. It doesn't have to be exact, just like that. Okay, so decide what order you want your fan pieces in. I've done this a little different than the one that I've machine stitched, just to get a different effect. So decide the order that you want them in. So that's my piece 1 and piece 2. That's these 2 pieces. Okay, so we're going to start off placing those right sides together, and then we're going to pin them together. So place a pin right in that corner of your drawn lines, and then bring it through to the second piece, bringing that out at that corner as well. So leave that there for a minute, and take a second pin and do exactly the same at the other end. So back through there. So that should be nice and flat. So then just bring them down vertically like that, and then just to be sure, pin a 3rd pin, making sure you come through the pencil line at the back. Place that like so. Okay. So now we're going to sew these together using a tiny little running stitch. You've got the red thread in your kit, which is fine for hand and machine piecing, and I've got my trusty little thimble. These are available on the website. So we're going to start off at this end here on the back side, and you're just going to sew through the 2 pencil lines. So make sure you're coming out at the back of the pencil line as well. I've knotted my thread, by the way. So then just do a running stitch to that end, and then take your pin out and bring your needle up right at that corner point. So bring that through, and then turn your piece round, and you're going to sew now in this direction. So that just gives you a nice secure end, rather than doing a couple of stitches on top of each other and gathering the fabric. So you're just going to do a running stitch like this, take 2 or 3 stitches on the needle at once, checking that you're going through the line at the back. So pull that through, and then every time I pull it through, I just do a back stitch just to secure it. So go all the way along the line, checking that you're picking up the back as well. Oops. And then when you get to this end, again, just take your pin out, bring the needle up at that point, turn it round, and then sew in the opposite direction, 2 or 3 stitches, like so. So once you've sewn all your fan pieces together, press the seams all in the same direction. And now we're going to first connect the small arc shape and then the large one up there like so. So to get the center point of this shape, fold this in half, and then because your seam allowances might not be an accurate 1/4 of an inch, place a pin through that point there and bring it up through that point, so you know that that's the center. So when you fold it, now that will be the center point of that seam. Okay, so that's your center point marked. Place your fan on top of the small arc, lining up this center seam with that crease mark on the place below. Insert a pin there, then insert a pin at that corner and bring it up at the corner on the red piece. And then to check that you're going to get an accurate square, line these two edges up along each other and go through the pencil line there and bring it out of there, so you know that that's a square edge, and do the same the other side. So bring a pin up at that point, take it through to that point, and then take it through the pencil marks down that seam, so that's edge is nice and straight. And then you can insert a couple of pins down this seam. So obviously these are curved edges, they're quite manipulative, you can manipulate them. So then just spread that seam out and take your pin through the pencil lines coming out on the pencil line on the back. Okay, so you should have no gathers, that should all fit into itself. So then, as before, notch your end of your thread. So then we're going to start sewing at this end just to secure the thread. So take it through both the pencil lines to the end. And then turn it round and you're going to sew along that seam like before. So when you get to these seams that are going to be in the way, rather than sewing them down, sew through them. So come out the other side and then carry on so that they're just left loose. So when you're finished sewing your whole seam, press the seam towards the red piece with an iron so you get a nice curve like that. So now we're going to attach this larger piece on the top like so. So before we do that, we're just going to trim, just snip into the seam allowance every ½ an inch or so, just stopping just before you get to that drawn line. Like so. Okay. So now to get the center mark, just place a pin through those two pencil points there, and then fold that seam. So that's your crease mark at the center. So then place that on top, checking that that corner is lined up with that corner. Pin there. And then as before, take your pin through that corner point there and bring it out there. And then place those two pieces so they're adjacent to each other and pin down. Do the same at the other end. And place them adjacent like so. And then insert a few more pins along that edge, so you can manipulate it so it's straight, or flat rather. So as before, you're going to start on the back at this end and then just do a couple of stitches there, going through both pencil lines. And you can do an extra stitch on that line just to secure it. Oops. And turn your piece round and then sew that whole seam. Checking that you're going through that pencil line at the back. So when you get to these seams, rather than sewing them down, sew all the way up to that point, and then flip that seam over that way and carry on the other side of it, like so, so you've not caught the seam in the sewing. Then when you get to the end, come through that pin mark, that pencil mark rather, turn and then go the other way. Right thread, and then open that out and get a nice curve. So we're going to iron that again outwards towards the red. Right, so there we are. So now we've got two identical blocks which we can sew together. So when you're sewing these together, we're not going to trim them down like in the foundation paper piecing, because you've still got those draw lines that should be quite accurate for you to line up with each other. Okay, so when you sewing these together, place them right sides together, and the most important part here is to match these two seams, so you're going to have a nice join here and here. So do that first. So take the pin through at that point there and bring it out at the pencil mark there, and place another pin at that point and bring it out at that point. So I put all these in vertically first before finishing them or reinserting them. So put that one there, this one you can actually, so that's all right. And we'll do that side. Like so. If you reinsert it back in the pencil lines, that should be a nice straight edge. And then take those and reinsert those two. So then you're going to sew along that line. So as you can see, this is my pieced block. There's 16 grandmother fan blocks in total. 4 blocks in each row and 4 rows. So this is my chosen layout. There are variations on the instructions. You can do your own thing. So sew them together, matching your seams nicely at the corners of each block. And then I've attached a 3-inch border in the blue. So that's cut from 3-inch strips. So if you're machine sewing, then obviously just attach it with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. If you're hand sewing, so draw a 1/4 inch line, a 1/4 inch mark in from the edge, so you can follow that line when you're sewing. Finally, press your seams outwards from the front, then layer it up and baste it, ready for quilting.